Today we have Dr. Alexandra Sowa. She is a dual board certified physician in internal and obesity medicine, founder of So Well, and author of the groundbreaking book, The Ozempic Revolution. With over a decade of clinical experience, Dr. Sowa has become a leading voice in metabolic health, specializing in GLP-1 medications and their transformative role in tackling obesity and chronic illness.
Welcome to Simply Walk the Talk. Our bodies and minds adapt to what we do most of the time. If you want to change your body and mind, you must change what it is you do most of the time. This podcast explores all things health, wellness, fitness, lifestyle, and biohacking. Stay tuned as we explore various thoughts, methods, and experiences from a multitude of conversations between our interesting guests and experts through many fields of work. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Simply walk the talk. Simply walk the talk.
Dr. Sowa, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super honored to be the first guest of 2025.
Yeah, well, I'm honored to have you. And, I must say, to start this off, big shout out to Dr. Shaker Pie. It's a mutual friend of ours. And as we were talking at the beginning of the show, before we started recording, I understand that you've known him for quite a while. So
long time.
Yeah.
Yes, we were baby doctors together who were looking for our passion and wanted to explore preventive health. And we met each other, I don't know, over 10, 15 years ago at this point.
Long time. Well, that's really cool. I think Dr. Shaker Pie has been on the show a couple times, and he's been known, I like to call him like a super connector. And so I'm grateful to be connected with you. And I'm actually very, very excited to get to know you more, because one of the things I love to do with the show is to allow the audience to be a fly on the wall while I'm getting to know certain experts in their field like yourself. And let's face it, loads of people have heard about GLP-1 and Ozempic, and you have a book,
Yes.
as I discussed in the intro. If you're watching the show, you see the book. It's good. It's a good book. I haven't really started it. I got just beyond the introduction, which is very interesting. I'll let the cat out of the bag on this, but it's called Why Doctors Have Failed You. So if that doesn't, strike your interest, I don't know what else will. Yeah. So let's kind of start there, because the fact that you're a doctor and your intro to the book has mentioned how doctors have failed us. I definitely want to learn a lot more about you, but I want to also start with your background. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. Okay. So I have always been interested in preventive health, keeping people healthy and well. And I actually went to Johns Hopkins as an undergrad to study public health. And I really thought global health was going to be my calling. But after spending time at the World Health Organization and doing global initiatives, I realized that I still was craving that one-on-one interaction with people. And I thought, okay, maybe I am set to be a doctor first, and then let's see where this goes. So I went to medical school. I went to NYU, and I had excellent training. But I still was like, okay, but where do I fit here? Because I want to keep people healthy. I don't want to just treat end-stage disease. My dad was a surgeon, and he was someone who's like, there's a problem, let's operate. And I was like, okay, I have such a different mind here. And I'm more about what can we do to just keep us living long, healthy, happy, fulfilled lives. So I chose to study internal medicine at NYU. And because I wanted just to really understand the body top to bottom, inside out, and then decide where to go from there. I became pretty disillusioned with my training, not because it wasn't great, but because the traditional American system puts a lot of energy just on the management of end-stage disease. And when I was sitting in my clinic, which was so diverse, I trained at Bellevue Hospital. So I saw people from every country speaking every language. And it didn't matter where people were coming from, whether I was seeing him in the private hospital at NYU or the public hospital or the veterans hospital. Everyone kind of had these same end stage diseases. And the blanket advice we would give for the majority of people would be like, well, it'd really benefit you to lose like 5 to 10% of your body weight. So lose some weight. And they'd be like, okay, but I've been trying for like 25, 30, 40, 50 years. What do I do?
Yeah, like I haven't been trying.
Yeah, exactly. And they're like, okay, everyone who needs to lose weight knows they need to lose weight. So I always felt terrible even kind of being like, have you thought about it? And then, we had this like pathetic little handout that was like, eat your vegetables and eat fruit. And then here's this outdated food pyramid. And I was like, there has to be something better than this. So I was so fortunate. I found very early on in kind of its infancy, the field of obesity medicine. And we called it that from the very beginning. People really didn't like that word, but we're like, hey, obesity is a disease and we need to bring the science and the money behind it. We need to treat this like a disease. This is truly a disease. And here is this nascent field. And I got to be a part of the early start of it. And it was so exciting. And obesity medicine is here to help people prevent future disease through metabolic health and, in the majority of cases, weight loss. And once I found that, I never looked back. And after my training and residency, I became board certified in this field. I got to study with some greats around the country, learning different approaches. So different nutritional therapeutic approaches, mind-body connection, mind-gut connection, all of these things, exercise, different ways, and kind of brought it into this field. And I got to open my own practice in New York City. And out of that came Sowa, which is now a method that I write about in the book. And we have a whole kind of ecosystem to support people who are on this journey.
It's amazing. And first of all, there's so many things that we can touch on. We'll go down several rabbit holes. And if we run out of time while trying to dive through a lot of these rabbit holes, then I'm quite sure we're going to have you back. Because I can already tell we're going to have a fun conversation. And for those that are watching, if you are watching this, I'm going to pull up on the screen the website. So Dr. Sowa's website, which is hold on, I'm just pulling it up here now. There we go. So it's getsowell.com. And she just mentioned part of the book. So here's what that looks like. So if you're watching, you see on the screen, we've got the book, and there's the lovely Dr. Sowa there. And also, just here's a few other GLP-1 resources, which I'm sure we're going to dive into and talk about. There's even a blog here, and it looks like a meal service and the whole back story. So we will touch on a lot of this, but I just wanted to let you know that, like, if you happen to have to pause this and then you need to refer back, please go to getsowell.com. And then at the end of this, we'll also make sure to let you know the best ways to keep in touch with what Dr. Sowa has going on. So what you may or may not know is that the conversation around obesity is actually very near and dear to me. My father, he passed away a year ago, and had been battling obesity for most of his adult life. And, he was definitely morbidly obese. Basically, right kind of in the midst of the pandemic, which for our family, we kind of knew that the pandemic he would be at the highest risk, so to speak, because of everything that is associated with morbid obesity. We know that it makes it far less of a chance for you to kind of get beyond COVID and anything disease related. So basically, he checked in the hospital at around 510 pounds. It's a big boy. And then by the time he was kind of nearing his time on Earth, he had lost, I think he got into like the high 200s. So he had lost almost half of his body weight. And a lot of that is because once he got into the hospital, he had to change his diet. They put him on a renal diet because of some of the issues he had with his kidneys and his liver, basically all the organs, right? And it was interesting that once he got put on this diet where it was almost life or death, magically he was able to lose the weight, right? And now I'm not to say that he didn't lose weight without being in the hospital, because there was 2 different times throughout his life when he and I together, we decided to kind of say, hey, I'm in this field of health coaching and I'm a fitness trainer. Can we put our money where our mouth is, so to speak? Let's do it together. And I helped my dad lose over 100 pounds 2 different times. But what's interesting about that is that it's like this yo-yo effect. And I know you talk about that, right? In fact, on the front of the book, you say reverse obesity, end yo-yo dieting, protect yourself from disease. All of these things would have been very important for my father to know about. He's not here with us any longer, but doesn't mean that we can't affect others. Okay. So I would love for you to touch on that, and what really truly kind of got you into this world. Do you battle with this into your family as well?
Yep. As you're describing your story, I'm sitting over here tearing up. I'm so sorry. And I do wish these medications would have been more widely available for your dad and for my inspiration, which is my grandmother's. And I write about them in the book. I come from a family of Eastern European descent. We're very hardy. We're generally new to this country, 2 generations. And weight is something that I grew up constantly hearing about, because my grandmothers specifically, just whatever they tried, it didn't work. And everyone around them kept telling them to lose weight. And they tried low fat. They tried no carb. They tried Weight Watchers multiple times. They're always recommitting to whatever new plan Weight Watchers was doing. They tried the steps. They tried joining their senior center. They tried the gym. They tried everything. And their weight just kept coming on and on and on. And they both passed away from complications from obesity. And I think about them often. I think about them a lot. And I feel like they've been with me throughout the book writing process, because doctors and society did fail them. They tried. It wasn't for lack of willpower. They were doing whatever anyone would tell them. And, my poor grandmother, she had 5 children. And when she was pregnant with twins, her doctor said, "You can't gain any weight. You're going to go on the watermelon diet." She was only allowed to eat watermelon during her pregnancy. And that's truly what medical advice was at the time. She didn't gain any weight. I think she maybe gained 10 pounds with twins. And then what happens? She screwed up her metabolism so drastically that after birth, she put on, 50 more. So that's the same reason I'm here. And I think because of my relationship with body, and I'm so fortunate, I've always had a healthy relationship with my own body. Am I the thinnest doctor around? No. Am I the fittest doctor around? No. But I do believe that we can be healthy in different bodies. And the goal of this medication in my book is not to achieve a sameness or a thinness. It really is to achieve health. And I think my superpower when we talk about this conversation is that I do have a deep emotional connection to my patients. I think I know the story. I think I've borne witness to all of the trauma that excess weight carries. I believe my patients. And in that first chapter, I talk a lot about just how traditionally medicine just says, well, weight is a willpower issue and you're not doing the right thing. And I think often in medicine, we don't listen to our patients. It's a do as I say, and that's about it. And then walk out the door and here's a prescription. And even with these medications, I am seeing this. This is the reason I wrote the book, is that we still need a very holistic, deep understanding of these medications. You need to know what to do, not just walk out of the office with a prescription. And I see the same pattern of what got us into this first place repeating itself, even with these game-changing medications where doctors just don't have the education. We're not taking a holistic approach. We're not giving enough confidence to the patient that they can transform all parts of their life with this medication, not just take a medication. So yeah, I think it's a complicated field. I think it's nuanced. I think anyone who's listening who has struggled with their own weight, who has a best friend who's on these medications, or a grandma who could benefit from them, or someone in their past who they wish could have been on them, it brings up lots of emotions. And I think we need to honor that.
There's a number of things that come up. And I must say, thank you for sharing that very vulnerable story. And I can feel it coming through for sure. And I'm happy that you are doing what you can, because you are truly making a difference, you know. And I'm saying this without even going too far in the book so far, right? But just knowing that we're going to touch on some stories that might help 1 or 2 people or 1,000 people, doesn't really matter, as long as we've helped, you know, someone to kind of get over that edge and maybe to extend a little bit more life and longevity out of this person or that person or these people, then we've done our job, right? So, so far, thank you for that. I can't help but try to place myself into the shoes of the person that is listening, the person that has heard about Ozempic or Manjaro or, you know, the GLP-1s, these weight loss drugs, right? There's so much misinformation out there. There's so many reactions. I think let's just hit it right on the head from the beginning. Let's talk about some of the most common misconceptions that you've discovered, maybe that you can either debunk or you can, I know we had talked about a couple of things that, you know, you don't quite know the answers to. And I would love to talk about those as well. Let's touch it.
First, the biggest misconception I see is that this shot is a magic wand and that there's no other work that needs to go into achieving health. And the second part of that is that some people will take that same argument and say, it's just a shot. You're not doing any work. You're taking the easy way out. So that is why I really wrote this book, because it is the first comprehensive user guide to how do you not just succeed on these medications, but how do you achieve total health? The amazing thing about GLP-1 medications is that they work in 3 big ways. They work on your brain, they work at the level of the gut, and they work at the level of blood sugar and the pancreas. Now, we have GLP-1 receptors all over our bodies, so there are even benefits and uses beyond that. But that's really how this drug influences how we change our lives from day one of the shot. And it's not...
May I interject here for a second, simply because I just want to make sure that some people listening may not even understand what we're talking about right now at this point. So maybe it will behoove us to kind of take a step back and explain what a GLP-1 is, the difference between maybe the word drug versus peptide versus prescription, you know.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so a GLP-1. So we have, I'll back up even further. In the book, I have a whole chapter, you're going to get to it next, and you're going to love it, where I talk about why is obesity so difficult to treat and manage on your own, and why, when in the scenario of your dad, when you helped him lose 100 pounds twice, why did it come back on? There are real scientific reasons for this, and it really comes down to hormones. And I get deep into it, but I make it really easy to understand. But there are hormones in our body that are created to keep us at a set point. And unfortunately, in our modern world, and especially as weight comes on, these hormones become dysregulated. And one of those hormones is actually GLP-1. Some of the other ones that you might have heard about are things like insulin, leptin, ghrelin. And our modern world has made it that the foods we eat, they create things like leptin resistance, so our body doesn't respond to it anymore. The high level of carbohydrates and inactivity creates insulin resistance, and insulin becomes dysregulated and doesn't really operate in that balance mechanism that it should. And GLP-1 is also affected.
And that's glucagon-like peptide, right?
Yes. So GLP-1 is made in the gut, and it has a very short activity. So you eat and it's released, and then it's supposed to create this nice little balance of dynamic where you're done eating. And that's all we should need it for. But the problem is, since 1980, we've just been going up and up and up in obesity. That's for many, many reasons. I talk about that in the book too. And we need to get to the root of that. We need to undo that work, like the corn subsidies and our packaged food and our environment. So I'm not discounting any of that, and we can get more into that. But the GLP-1 hormone that's in our body, it doesn't really do its job anymore. And that's where this hormone, this peptide, this protein has come into play. Now, I come from a place of I support the FDA version of these medications because they are the ones who have been studied. And that's part of a misconception we can get into too. They have been around since 2005. And we have millions of people studied at this point, and that is the version of the medication that I feel really comfortable going on record. There really aren't any risks. We'll talk about, we can get deep into the studies, but that's what we're talking about. So yes, but it is a peptide, this GLP-1.
Nice disclaimer, by the way.
so GLP-1 analog, the medication, it is a mimicking of the hormone that we naturally create. And what's been amazing is that through the years since 2005, our versions of how we create this have gotten more effective at helping us with weight loss and our metabolism, with our blood sugar management, really, for lack of not quite metabolism, but really helping us achieve health. And that's because the hormone has gotten closer to what our body makes. And so we recognize it better. But what's super special about the medication is that it has a very long half-life. So instead of sticking around in our body for minutes, it sticks around for actually weeks. Now it has its longest peak in the first week, and this is why it's now a weekly injectable medication. So that it's mimicking something that naturally occurs in our body, something that doesn't quite work because of the modern society we live in. And once obesity comes on, once excess weight comes on and further dysregulates the relationship between the brain and the gut and the pancreas, these medications are very, very effective. And they are so effective because, unlike previous medications we've had in the field of obesity and metabolic health medicine, they are not just appetite suppressants. And when you're asking me about misconceptions, that's often what I hear about it. It's just, you're just not eating. And if you would just stop eating in the first place, this, you could lose the weight. It's not that easy, because I argue that a lot of what makes it so hard to lose weight is hormone dysregulation at the level of the brain. I use this example in the book, but just because you want to hold your breath underwater doesn't mean you can, right? Your brain will tell you to come up, when you're a little kid under the water and you're like, how long can I hold my breath? Well, there's going to be a drive centrally in your brain that forces you up to take a breath of air. And that is the same kind of driving force that happens if you tell someone who is dysregulated to just stop eating, right? There's going to be some hormonal override that actually, even if you will it, you can't just stop eating. And unfortunately, it becomes even further dysregulated by the types of foods you want and the cravings, and your brain actually becomes damaged by the sorts of food that surround us in this world. So these medications actually change what we crave, how we want to move our bodies, the types of foods we want, our ability to actually say, no, that wasn't on my plan, and I'm going to eat protein and vegetables instead of the first thing, I see walking home, and I'm going to, stop into Popeyes or something, which has never really been the way that people have reacted to other medications that we've had. And so that is kind of one of, I'm talking about all the misconceptions here. I started with the idea that this is just a thing you take and that there's no other work to be had. But really what's so transformative about this medication is that because it works on the level of the brain, if you are armed with knowing how to eat, knowing how to think, knowing how to exercise, knowing how to change your behaviors, for the first time in your whole life, even if you've read 50 diet books before, for the first time in your whole life, because of this medication, you will actually be able to start to make those behavior changes, because this medication is not just an appetite suppressant. It is truly a whole body transformation.
And so, again, I'm going to keep going down these rabbit holes, because that was very beautifully explained. And then it allowed me to start thinking, oh, okay, what about this person? What about that person, right? So the way that you explained that, I think it would be safe to assume that this is, especially at the level you're talking about, the medication side of it, it's for people who have a metabolic issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, should be.
It should be, right? Because, this is part of the other misconception, right? Is that there's some people who think, well, I just want a little bit of weight to lose because it's about to be summertime. I have this little pooch that I want to get rid of. But they're, compared to the person who is morbidly obese or has a metabolic disease, that person is much healthier, right? Therefore, they maybe should not be considering, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like, should they also be considering this medication?
They should not.
Okay.
On the surface. So I get this question every day over on Instagram, right? Because it seems so good to be true. And here I am talking about how amazing it is. Again, this is not a drug that's trying to get us to a place of thinness or leanness. It's not. It is really, and there are limits to what this drug can do, and we can talk about that. But, we were talking about the fact that our body makes this hormone, and then we give you this hormone, and then the body does what it should have been doing, which is helping us keep a balance, and it can help us take up to 25% of our total body weight, off. It helps us with heart protection, kidney protection, brain protection. It has all these benefits because we're decreasing inflammation. We're taking away fat mass. So you're like, well, that's great. Shouldn't everyone be on it? No, because if it's just for 10 to 15 pounds, well, okay. But then you are committing yourself to lifelong use of this medication because this is a synthetic hormone. And just like if you had hypothyroidism, in most scenarios, if you start to display signs of hypothyroidism and we have the discussion that you need to go on a synthetic hormone, you will likely be on the synthetic hormone for life.
Right.
It's very rare that people are able to come off of this medication. And same thing is true with this medication. So
that was going to be my next question.
Yeah. And there are and I talk about the people in the book who can come off of this med. It's really only about 5%, maybe up to 10% in the right scenarios where people are able to come off of this medication. And it might be on the person, it might be for the person who just has 15 pounds to lose, but we just don't know. And I think that that's a really big conversation that's not being had when I'm seeing people get these medications online without a larger discussion, and they think this is just for a quick fix. What I worry about that is exactly what we were talking about before, which is yo-yo dieting. Yo-yo dieting in any form is more detrimental to your health than if you just kept the weight exactly where you started. In most scenarios, if you lose 100 pounds, regain 100 pounds, lose 100 pounds. If you lose 20 pounds, regain, lose. Because every time we do that, we are hurting our basal metabolic rate, we are hurting our muscle mass, we are hurting our brain, and we're just hurting our heart. It's just so complicated. But really, we know that health outcomes with chronic yo-yo dieting are worse. So in that scenario, if you're like, well, but I don't want to be on the med forever, but I just want to be skinny for that wedding, and then I'll put the weight back on. Well, you know what? You're probably not going to put on 15 pounds when you go off the med. You're probably going to put on 20. And then you're going to be like, I want to do it again. And I'm just going to do it short term. And now I'm going to take off 10 pounds. But the next time you put on 20, and you end up creeping up higher and higher. And so we really need to be very careful about that scenario. And I think it's really hard right now on social media because you see a lot of people and content creators and even celebrities, and you see people just getting thin, and you're like, well, I want that. I don't want to have to work at the gym. I don't want to have to think about my food. And I would really encourage that person to really consider what is health. And as long as your metabolic health labs are looking good and you're in the gym and we're looking at, body composition and we're really working on our muscle mass rather than just getting skinny, and we're looking at leanness, then probably not, it's not great for you to go on a medication that you might have to be on for the rest of your life.
Something that I find to be very interesting, and I love kind of uncovering sort of random thoughts and ideas, because I realize I'm one person, you're one person, and we have, different ways of thinking. But then if we can imagine all the different people that might be listening or watching this, we'll have different ways of thinking as well. And so the fact that you sort of designated this conversation from your perspective, from your expertise, from your field of work, we're talking specifically about medication, right? But what about the person who is, and I again, I know you have certain limitations on what you can and cannot say, but let's just say the person that looks at this as a non-medication, right? They've gone online, they've done something with, that it would be considered a microdose. So maybe
let's talk about it. There's nothing I can't talk about.
Right? Okay. Yeah.
Same thing. Even if it's a small dose of the medication, I'll use the same example. Like I have to start people on thyroid medication at the very lowest dose. It's still medication. And over time, you know what happens as people age and disease gets worse, you generally need higher doses of the medication. So I've seen this online that microdosing is like some sort of trick or hack to get out of like staying on this med forever, but it's not. It's just starting at a lower dose. And actually all of these medications have been studied at the microdosing dose. Like there's nothing, that's where we start. In clinical trials, people get different versions. We just know that generally the lower doses really don't achieve the health goals that we want. I think the biggest problem with people going online or going to places that aren't comprehensive, you know, I'm an obesity medicine doctor. There aren't that many of us. So not everyone can come to a doctor like me. That is why I wrote this book. So I'm like, this is the blueprint, the framework for holistic health, right? So you can get all your questions answered. Here is the framework. And even for doctors who are like me, a lot of them operate in very traditional health systems where you get 20 minutes at max for a patient visit. There's only so much you can do in that time. So my problem with all of these places that are popping up everywhere, I mean, I can't even listen to my favorite like pop culture podcasts these days without like many ads popping up for get a GLP-1, you know, you can't go anywhere without it. My biggest problem with them is that it is really just transactional and here's a medication. And we are not looking at this from a lens of health. You know, a lot of these places aren't even ordering your labs. And I talk about this in the book. It's truly malpractice, in my opinion, to start this medication without looking at the fundamental metabolic health. Like, how do we know what we're improving if we don't know where we're starting? And how can you ever use that data to your benefit for making your decisions as an informed patient if you don't understand what your fasting blood sugar was or your insulin resistance, or let's look at your triglycerides? You know, metabolic health is pretty clearly defined, but it's often overlooked in even the traditional doctor's office. And especially in some of these places where people are like, well, let me just go get it online and microdose it. I don't care if you're microdosing it. You should still know what's going on the inside. Shocking statistic that only 12% of adult Americans meet criteria for complete metabolic health. 88% of us are falling short in one primary category of our metabolic health when it comes to either where we carry visceral fat or what our labs look on the inside. So that is just shocking. So if you're going on this med just for 15 pounds, like let's make sure you don't have prediabetes because it's silent and you should know that.
Oh, this is good because depending on how you take this question will depend on I guess what the response is. But speaking of statistics, how many people do you see or what percentage of people do you turn away from prescribing Ozempic?
Yeah, that's great. I actually have pretty clear criteria in my practice. And I talk about actually how sometimes I bend those criteria because not everybody, like a BMI misses things.
That's body mass index for those who don't know. Yeah.
Yes. So that's just height and weight. And it's not taking into account anything about your history and your story and specifically your body composition, which is where we should all be moving toward when we define obesity.
Yeah.
I really can't figure out why we haven't been able to get like easier, more widely adopted mechanisms for body fat composition. I know.
Money. It's all about that money, baby.
It drives me up the wall. But yeah, that's really the gold. That should be the gold standard of who and how we're helping and then looking at labs. But I do turn away people who are in this for vanity. So in the book, the first thing that I ask people, so to go into more of the book, out of my medical practice, I have a super unique medical practice where I actually realized that my patients needed education more than anything. So I could write them the prescription, but in order for me to help them in the way that I wanted to help them, I actually created a whole curriculum. I call this the Sowa method. People come to my practice. They're only able to come in when they come in and do this 10-week program with me. And I teach them every week like it's a little bit of a mini college course. And those foundations, I realized the right ways to get people to adopt habits, change food. When was it right? When were they ready to start doing, more exercise? How do we work through all the mental blocks that happen in this very complicated journey? And that is what was the inspiration behind this book, because it was working so well, no pun intended, that is the name of the company, but it was working so well that I had to really kind of let this out into the public. And the first thing that I have people do, they always are like, well, tell me how to eat. And I'm like, okay, we're not getting into that until week 3. Hold your horses. Because I could give anyone a meal plan, but if you don't know why you're doing any of this and you don't set the foundation for some strong habits, it's all going to fall apart. You're going to get overwhelmed. And this is going to turn into like anything like it was before, where it's like the diet starts tomorrow. I didn't do it right today, so I'll do it again tomorrow. And then you get caught up and it never will work. So the first thing I have people do is establish their why. Why are you doing this? And I give them a framework, because I've realized that if you only are telling you're doing this for vanity reasons, this is not going to work. You are not going to be happy, because guess what? Skinny isn't motivating. Fitting into your jeans from 15 years ago is like a flash in the pan of like excitement, but then it's not motivating. The things that are motivating are rooted in health. I don't want to be like my grandmothers. I want to be more robust in my later years. I want to get down on the floor and play with my grandkids. I want to be able to walk up the subway steps without getting out of breath. Those things are super, super, super motivating. And those are the things that keep people going. So if you tell me in my practice that I'm doing this just for vanity, I don't think we're the right fit. I don't, because I don't want to worsen eating disorders or disordered ways of thinking about our body.
Yeah, and I respect that. I think if we're being completely honest with each other, I think the average person who is doing it for vanity would probably never admit that to you, right? So I wonder, like, do you have a clear way, or are there experiences in which you're kind of like, you know what, I'm not too sure that you're doing this for the right reasons, and you may not need this. Keep in mind, you might have to be on this for the rest of your life. However, I'm not turning you away. I'm just shifting your focus, and maybe we can go down this path, right?
Yep. Yeah. And I lay this out. So in the book, I give case study examples, and GLP-1 medications might be appropriate, right? After we really go through weight history up and down and understand what other health issues you're dealing with, and we look at metabolic labs, it might make the right decision for you. Also, we still have other medications in our metabolic health toolkit where we don't have to jump to GLP-1s right away. So if slight blood sugar abnormalities and just a little bit of weight gain has been nagging you, we have metformin. Metformin is a super drug that's been around for a very long time. And it is a longevity medication, in my opinion, because it's of its ability to keep blood sugar stable and make your body more sensitive to insulin. We have other tools that aren't as expensive, there aren't shots. And there are other things that we can do. So I think that everyone deserves kind of a full look. That's where we have to be careful by just jumping straight to GLP-1 medications when you don't quite meet the criteria.
That I'm so happy you pointed that out and touched on it, because there could be people watching or listening to this podcast thinking that, there's a situation in which we have a obesity doctor or weight loss doctor, and it's like if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? I can imagine that there's people who think that, like, well, I'm not going to even talk to a weight loss doctor because he or she is going to definitely prescribe me GLP-1. And what you're telling me right now is that no. You need to meet the criteria for that. Yeah. And have you checked out all these other things?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I'm a big fan of investigating. So our company Sowa even has a metabolic health lab testing kit you can do at home, because a lot of doctors won't even look at labs anymore. Like they'll just come in and like, you got them 2 years ago, you're good, or you need to better understand. And they're like, oh, you're not 30 yet. We don't even need to check your cholesterol, or fasting insulin. You can see our little kit here on the website. But I am a big here. Mm-hmm. And so I specifically really like people to understand their insulin resistance. So we test for fasting insulin at home. And this is something that most doctors don't even understand. They're like, I've never even heard of, I didn't even think I could order that test, right? And it allows us to look at early insulin resistance or the precursor to prediabetes or eventually type 2 diabetes. And so I think that if your doctor says, no, just eat less, exercise more, there are more things you can do. And starting with uncovering your metabolic health is really the first step of that. And yes, we have other what we call anti-obesity medications and other medications that can target anti-inflammation and lower blood sugar that can be very effective for that 5 to 10 to 15 pound weight loss. Also, I do believe, and some parts of the internet have come after me for this,
Uh-oh.
but yeah, you ready to get controversial? I believe in therapeutic diets sometimes. So meaning not dieting, but understanding if you see underlying insulin resistance, learning how to look at carbohydrates and learning how to really favor macronutrients that will serve you. In the book, we talk a lot about protein first, because when you're on these medications, you don't have a large appetite, and it's crucial you get in your protein. If you find that you have underlying insulin resistance, it becomes even more crucial. And there are patients in my practice, and I don't include it in the book, but I include a link out if people want to learn more about it, but for very low carbohydrate diets. Occasionally, when our body has become so dysregulated hormonally, it becomes a very clear path to feeling well when you eliminate carbohydrates from the equation. This is not for everybody. This is for very specific use case scenarios, but there are a lot of ways that we can still manage our metabolic health outside of medications, but the medications make it so that we're not just constantly on this yo-yo dieting cycle and getting sicker and sicker and sicker.
So then, are you leveraging other tools like CGMs, continuous glucose monitors, and things like that? Are you working?
So I don't find them as necessary for people who are on the GLP-1 journey, but for those who find that they have underlying insulin resistance and they're in a pre-diabetes state and they want to better understand without medications what's going on, I think it's super effective. What's that?
I did it. I did it
you
for
did
those
it?
reasons.
What did you learn?
Well, first of all, I learned the different ways my body responds to insulin and carbohydrates, so to speak, right? And like the difference between doing, I think maybe the most fascinating was the difference between doing like an endurance workout versus a strength workout, like a high intensity interval training. And my insulin would spike when I was doing the high intensity interval training, and it wouldn't as much when I was doing endurance training. And so that's a really cool strategy, I think, for competitive athletes, right? And, it's not just for the person who wants to lose weight, but then doing the test to make sure that, like doing all the blood panels to make sure that I was a good candidate for it. I discovered that I was very close to being pre-diabetic. So it made me go, uh-oh. So I understood this conversation around metformin and whether I need to take it or not, how to regulate my hormones. So it was a good wake up call for me.
I mean, this is so important. This is exactly what I was saying. Look at you. You're doing all the right things. You are you're like the picture of what we think is health, and you're doing all the right things. But that was to my point. If you need to understand your labs, because you just don't know what's going on the inside, and you need to learn techniques and keep an eye on it, because sometimes, no matter how much we do in life, genetics will bite us in the butt, and we might need to utilize other tools. So thank you for sharing that. It's so important for your listeners to know.
For sure. And I'll give you another one, even though I know you didn't ask for it. So, and I would love to make an introduction at some point for you on this. But being that I'm also a health coach, like I look up to people like you who are doing this in the clinic, like you're in the field doing this work, and I can learn a lot from you, and I will when especially when I go through the book. But there was something else that I used to do back in the day when I was first kind of becoming a health coach. Obviously, I was trying to sort of create a little bit more variety in my offerings. So I didn't want to be just known as the fitness trainer, the guy who just tells people how to exercise and be in a good posture. So I started to do health coaching, and I learned the importance of the gut health, right? So our gut microbiome is completely crucial for our longevity, also for our health, right? And so back in the day, there was a product called Viome that I used to work very closely with, right? There's another one now, though, that I feel like is probably the best on the market, at least the best that I've seen in a long time, and helped me to really understand my weight and the fluctuations in my weight. And it's a company called Vitract. Are you familiar with Vitract?
No, I don't know that one. Just looking.
Okay. Very, very good. Okay. Because, you may have heard of the gut bacteria known as Akkermansia, right?
Yeah.
So Akkermansia has been discovered in the guts. It's plentiful in the guts of people that are lean, right? And so when you hear that, a lot of times people go, oh, well, if I want to be lean, it's almost like doing a stool transfer. You can just take more Akkermansia and chances are you'll get more lean. And that's not true, because there are some people who have too much Akkermansia, and then there are some people who don't have enough. And when I did my first Vitract test, my gut test, I had 0% Akkermansia. 0, right? It was the first time that they had seen anything like that. And I had nearly 100% butyrate, right? Which is also very interesting thing. So I was able to benefit from taking Akkermansia, but I wouldn't have known had I not done that test.
Yeah, that's a little bit of the problem here, is we know how crucial the gut microbiome is for weight. We haven't been able to crack that nut yet. It's kind of like in terms of clinically being like one size fits all. It doesn't. It's kind of like the invention of these GLP-1 medications. For a long time, we knew that there was something in these 7 big hormones that I talk about in the book that had become dysregulated. And we were slowly going down and being like, this one, we could target this pathway. And then it didn't work. Like the leptin medications didn't work. Okay, and then we're going down. And then GLP-1, it was kind of by fluke did we discover that this hormone analog really was going to have a big impact. I think, and that was about 20 years ago, 30 years ago now. I think we're at that period with the gut microbiome where we're slowly starting to realize, okay, it's exactly what you said. It's like we need to treat on the individual level. This is so important. Something, I talk about this tipping point in about 1980s where we were pretty lean. You look at pictures of the beach, right, from the 1970s, and everyone's lean. There's lean.
Happy to have their shirt off, right?
Yeah. And then you look now, and we don't look like that. So we have lots of working theories as to what happened. But I think as a whole, what really did happen was our change to the microbiome. And we do know that and I talk about epigenetics in the book. I actually think that that's kind of the key to reversing all of this within a few generations. Our obesity epidemic is the epigenetic component. Like, how do we go back? Like, yes, there's always going to be a genetic component where about 10% of people will probably still have obesity. But how do we go back and go back to undoing our epigenetic modification, where we've all 70% of the country now suffers from obesity. Mm. And I think it's that gut microbiome connection, but we're just on the cusp of being able to make this global. And it does seem in some early scientific rodent reports that we are seeing improvement overall with GLP-1 medications and what's happening in the gut, which makes a lot of sense.
And I'm so happy you said that last piece, because this could be part of the strategy in making that decision when someone's on the fence on, deciding whether they're going to be on a GLP-1 for the rest of their life versus let me try something and just to make sure before I have to go down that path, right? Because let's face it, right now, it's still cost prohibitive for a lot of people. And this is the thing that is so problematic, because it's typically the people who don't have the money to do it are the ones that need it the most.
So I don't think this podcast will go live in time, but sitting in Congress right now is actually a new proposed rule that will allow for Medicare and Medicaid to cover anti-obesity medications, GLP-1 drugs like Wegovy.
Oh, that's huge.
It's huge. We have actually had a rule on the books since the early 90s that said Congress could not fund any obesity medications, weight loss medications. And we have been working, our societies and lobbyists have been working on reversing this for a long time. And this rule would really transform affordability for all people if we were able to get the government involved. And it's really hard to deny the large benefits of these medications. So we lose weight, we control type 2 diabetes, but what we're seeing now are all the downstream effects of these diseases. So decreased all-cause mortality, decreased risk of heart attack, stroke, decreased kidney disease. We can literally stop the progression of prediabetes in its tracks to type 2 diabetes. You do that, you have a downstream effect of all of the things that come with it, right? Kidney disease, heart disease, amputations, immobility, things like that. And now we're even starting to potentially see benefit in treatment of dementia. And we're seeing osteoarthritis improvement. Sleep apnea just got an indication for these medications. So Congress now can't really say this is just about weight. They're like, oh, we got a medication now that's helping us with all these future downstream diseases. So we're really hoping, if we all voice enough support, that if government gets involved, then everybody will have to bring these prices down and it'll become more affordable for all. In Europe, the cost of these drugs is about $99 to $199 a month, not $1,200. It's ridiculous what we do here in this country.
Of course. And again, that's the reason why people are resorting to going online and getting things that may not be as effective. It may not even be.
Can I also
GLP-1.
say these compounding pharmacies are still super expensive.
Yeah.
Like, it's the pharmaceutical companies who kind of set the precedent. They're overcharging everybody, and I don't even know what's in them, and it makes me mad. So we just really need to get the standardized drug prices down, and our government at this point, I truly believe, needs to be part of it. I will also say, for anyone out there listening and being like, no, the government's job should be for prevention, I agree. And I have seen this dichotomy of people being like, Ozempic means that we're just like slapping something on the problem. We need to fix our food chain. We need to fix what got us here in the first place. I agree, but we can do both at the same time.
Yeah.
And if anyone's like, but I still don't understand, like, if we just gave everyone in the United States healthy food, wouldn't that solve it? It wouldn't, because this is what I want people to understand, is that obesity is a disease. And just like, let's use the example of smoking and lung cancer. We need the government to get involved to prevent smoking in the first place. So that's the way I look at improving our food sources and our food in our schools and how we move and how we're incentivized to keep up with our health. But if you progress to the point of lung cancer, we can't use those same tactics. We need to treat you. And that's where we sit right now. So we need to do both things at once. And my hope is that once we treat the disease, we manage it, and there's this trickle-down effect, and then we could realign most of our energies for just prevention.
It's very similar to the idea of alcoholism. So I'm sure you know this, but for people who are listening and watching, you may not understand this, but when a person is a true alcoholic, you can't just, well, you can, but it's fatal to just take them off of alcohol immediately. Like, they can die, right? So this is to your point, right? Or similar to your point, which is, there's multiple things we can be doing. And I want to touch on one other thing that I want to make sure that people understand, that there's so much more to this than just losing the weight, right? Because we have to also remember why a person got to that point in the first place. A lot of times it's mental, right? Let's say, like in my dad's case, he experienced a divorce, with my brother and I's mom, and, his two sons got taken away from him for a period of time. He then got his kids back. He was a single father raising us, doing all of these things, right? Our mom was also, going through life, dealing with everything. So she had it very, very tough. So both of my parents had it very, very tough. But my dad, I think, was the one that really took on this idea of empty nest syndrome, right? When my brother and I left, he finally got us back. He was raising us by ourselves, so to speak. And then my brother goes off to college. I go off to college, and then I move out of the state, traveling the world. And, the only thing that has kind of given him comfort, because he doesn't have a new wife, he doesn't have a new family, not many of his friends are there to come by and visit him. So he's taking comfort in eating. So what happens then when your identity becomes, the fact that you are an eater, that you are overweight, that you're obese, that you've had to crawl into your shell every time you see a kid pointing at you saying that, oh, he's fat, daddy, he's a fat man, right? Like, what happens then when you lose all the weight? You don't just magically become a happy person, right? So, like, do you have something in your program that you could also work to?
You're gonna love this book. Please keep reading.
Okay.
So what you just touched on is so insightful, and it's really, really important. And it's the part that gets totally missed in this conversation. So I lay out the 3 chunks of foundations in the book. We talked a little bit about the why, and I'll tell you about people how to keep up with their habits. That's the habit foundations. And then I tell you about the food foundations. It's not a diet, but like, how do you nourish your body? And then in that is also the lifestyle exercise. And then the third foundation, the part that I think is the most important, is the mental foundation. And I use cognitive behavioral therapy in my practice as a foundation to help people catch, this is how I describe it, catch their negative thoughts and to get ahead of the things that are going to happen in this journey. And I've never seen this done anywhere else, but in the book, I'll lay out kind of the things that will cause you distress in this journey. And I see it almost across the board. First time it happens is the first 10 pounds down. People start to panic that this won't work, just like every other diet has never worked. And they start to really tell themselves, and I lay that out. And it happens throughout other parts of the journey. Some are positive and some are negative. When someone actually compliments you for the first time on your weight loss, well, we fantasize about that. But when it actually happens, often it can kind of set off a lot of negative thinking. But the thing that you talk about is what happens when you take away the comfort. And we need to identify that from the very beginning. And we need to work toward what are we going to replace that with. Now, it doesn't happen all at once, but it can be dramatic. And I talk about other kind of patients where this happens. And it's not anxiety and it's not depression, but it can feel like your whole life has changed because at 8 o'clock when you would sit down and watch your shows and you would have a whole, tub of ice cream because that was the association. What happens when you actually physically, literally cannot have that ice cream? You will not feel well. You don't want it. And what do you do with that time in your brain? I actually encourage people to go back to what they enjoyed in childhood. When your dad had you in the house and he had you with all of his I know you did. I can just tell your dad had you sign up for activities and you were doing things and you foster hobbies. Well, unfortunately, a lot of that falls away in adulthood. And what do we replace it with? We replace it with going out to bars with friends, food, eating, self-soothing with cookies. And we need to work really hard to get back to what else do we do with our time and our space and our brain. And, I give examples to people of what that could be. I've had people take up needle pointing. I have an example in the book. I've actually had an adult patient who was like, I really liked Legos as a kid. Can I go get like one of these like adult Lego kits? And I was like, yes,
pretty cool.
That's a great thing for you to do at night with your hands, right? Our grandparents used
Instead
to whittle and exactly. You need something to do with your hands. And then as more weight comes off, generally your life starts to open up a little bit where maybe you're going to go for that walk after dinner instead of kind of just moving from table to couch. And that's great. And you'll want to do it. But in the interim, we really need to pay attention to that. Also, there is only so much that we can do with work on our own. So I give people the structure to do this mental work on their own through the book. But usually at some point in the weight loss journey, if this is something that's opening up a void, you're going to have to work with a therapist and kind of get more to the root of why did we start filling up our life with food or drink in to kind of fill a void. And what do we do to unwind that? So that's shocking to people because just like you said, losing the weight doesn't make you different on the inside. People think, okay, I'll get to my goal weight. And that's when they need the therapist because they're like, but I'm not happy. I'm always telling that, like, thinness does not give happiness. Sometimes the way that our whole life changes will, but we often have to work on it. So it's kind of looking out for it as a red flag, knowing that you're not alone, knowing that this is a very collective experience, even though you experience it alone, and just kind of being on the lookout. It's really important. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, and thank you for talking on it because, if a person hasn't seen it so far in this discussion, if they're still with us now watching and listening, like clearly your stuff, and we haven't even touched, we're just kind of at the tip of the iceberg here, but I there's a number of things that I can't wait to ask you about, and maybe we have you back. Like once I actually go through the book, I have a feeling I'm going to be suggesting this to people over and over and over. But I don't want to lose the opportunity to make sure that people see what's on your site. So I'm going to share the website again so you can see all the different products because you've first of all, kudos to you for building a beautiful website and building a brand that has so much benefit to it, and I think it's worth applauding and celebrating.
Thank you.
So we've got the B complex, we've got balance, you got blender bottles, you got sleep supplements. Yeah.
So just a little bit backstory about this brand. So in the pandemic, I started with an at-home testing kit because people really couldn't get into the doctors. And I was like, listen, weight is coming on very fast. We know that weight and metabolic dysfunction makes COVID worse. I'm going to do something pretty unique. So I launched this at-home testing kit. You can prick your finger. We call it the Weight Biology Kit. And from there, this brand started to evolve. And what I'm probably the proudest of right now is that I started to do this out of my clinic, and now this is growing and growing and growing. And yes, we have other supplements that support metabolic health, everything from berberine and chromium to magnesium supplements that help with sleep. But our hallmark product right now is called the GLP-1 support system. And we really have come out as a brand for people who are on GLP-1 medications or at any part in their journey. Maybe they're pre-contemplative, maybe they're on it, or maybe they're coming off of it. And there are things to do to support you if you need to come off of this medication. Our GLP-1 support system is 3 products. It's fiber, electrolytes, and protein, but all made enhanced. So they have many things in them. So I took these 15 supplements that I was recommending to everyone and I put them into these products, and they're all made specifically for the GLP-1 user. So the taste buds, their guts, all this healthy gut microbiome stuff. There's nothing fake in here. There's no dyes. Everything's enhanced. So it's gentle on your gut, and that it's all natural. And it was really important to me because I had to recommend products to my patients, but they were all, I didn't like, can I curse? I want to say they're all crap. They're all crap. Yeah. And I didn't like them, and I didn't feel good about it. And so I went out and created it. And now this brand Sowell is going nationwide in retail. And I'm really proud of it. And a lot of people come at me and say, but you're a doctor, you shouldn't be recommending, don't you feel like you shouldn't be recommending products? And I'm like, no, I know this user. I know these patients. I created something just for them. I'm super proud to be sitting in the room with Nestle and all these other brands who are trying to hop on this train, and I'm doing it for the patient. So I appreciate you giving it a little shout out because generally I keep it separate, but I'm ready to start coming more into it and say, it's super unique to be a doctor developed, totally developed. This is owned 100% by me. My husband's now part of the company, and we're growing this as a small family business that's not so small.
Well, I definitely have a couple of ideas that we might be able to collaborate on.
Great.
So we'll talk about this off show, and then who knows, maybe whenever if we do something together, who knows, maybe people will start to see it come alive. And we talked about it here first a little bit. So, this has been fascinating, and I would love for the audience to kind of jot down your questions, your feedback, your comments, your concerns, and maybe put them in the comment section, or email me, or hit me up on social media. Obviously, we'll link to everything on the show. We'll link to Dr. Sowa's information, all of the website and her social media, of course. But I like to get weird before we sign off.
Okay.
I like to get a little bit weird. And I've been doing this podcast since 2017. So I've been doing it for quite a while. And one of the things I used to ask all the time would be like, what is your number one pet peeve or your top 2 pet peeves? And while that's fun and I like to understand what makes a person tick, I started to kind of switch it last year to ask people like some of the most random questions there are. So,
Hit me.
what I would like to know is, what are your thoughts on aliens?
Oh, they totally exist.
Yeah. Have you ever seen one?
I have not, but I why not? I mean, they have to be out there.
Why do you think that?
I think, being a doctor, you realize there's so much we don't understand out in the world. And I think I've connected with people. I've been with people when they die, and there's something beyond us. And why do we get to selfishly believe that we're the only ones who experience what's out there? So I totally believe in other life forms.
Well said.
And if that's the clip that goes viral from our talk today.
Well, let me follow that up then, because I love the way you spoke about that. And you had this beautiful smile on your face, so you definitely weren't thwarted. But if you had the ability, like if there was kind of this magical opportunity to do one way or the other, if you were able to actually experience a UFO or an alien abduction, would you go for it, or would you say no?
I've got 4 kids, so I got to stay put and take care of them. So I'd probably say no, because I wouldn't be sure I'd return.
Interesting. Okay, well said. Yeah, that's funny, because I've always said that, like, if ever, this conversation comes up, because I mean, I've got weird conversations that happen in my friend group. We don't mind getting weird. In fact, we love getting weird. But I always say yes. But however, when you mention the kids, I have 2 small kids, and I can't imagine leaving them on this earth without me. So yeah, maybe I would have to rethink that. I'd have to rethink
a family trip, epic spring break.
Right. Exactly. Can we all go? I don't know if my kids would be up for it, but anyway, yeah. Thanks for indulging on that, because, in fact, Dr. Shaker Pie and I, we have a very funny story, and it involves UFOs and aliens, and that's a story to tell you in another time.
Can't wait.
Anyway, okay, like I promised, could you please let people know the best ways to be in touch with you, to find out more about what you're doing?
Yep. So you can head to our website, getsowell.com, or you can find me across all social media at Alexandra Sowa, MD. And I'm pretty good about responding to questions. So bring them over there. And if we get enough, I'll come back and we'll have part 2.
Yes, let's do it. Part 2, part 3, part 4. And who knows, maybe we can do like a live or something, because I know this topic is very important, and you have been a very fun guest to have on the show, and you definitely, know your stuff. You have a great presence on video. So I would love to see more of you out there, and definitely share whatever you have to share with me, like, so I can put it, kind of keep updating people with the newsletter and whatnot. And again, one more time, everyone, the Ozempic Revolution with Dr. Alexandra Sowa, MD. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah. And until next time, everyone, this is Josh signing off with Simply Walk the Talk. Peace.
Simply walk the talk.
Walk the talk, talking facts. Move like me, but I move a little fast. Make my move, here to last. Fasten these seat belts, I'm coming past. Take care of me, longevity. Hack my biology, better believe. Walking the talk, soul, mind, and body connected. Better come give us a listen.